Are we live? I think we're live. All right. Welcome, folks. Welcome to day number 2 of Clockwork.
Hello.
Welcome to day number 2 of Clockwork Alchemy in absentia. First of all, first things first, let's get everything out of the way first. Did you enjoy the show last night? Because that's important. Hi, Tiffany. I can see your comments a lot more readily than I did when I'm out there doing duck float. As a matter of fact, just close the window. Never know when the frogs are gonna pipe up again. Anyway, I've got all this stuff. For those of you who don't know, I've been playing Edgar Allan Poe at the Great Dickens Christmas Fair for the past 73 years. And so during that time, of course, I always do research when I'm playing this role, so I know a heck of a lot about him. And so I'm doing this thing. So let's start. Let's start the way the show starts. I do a reading every day at the Dickens Fair. And here's how it works. I come out and I observe the crowd and I say, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen and Americans. 4 days ago, I was asked to recite for the Chislehurst Townswomen's Guild, and the poem that I chose for recitation elicited such an extreme negative reaction that I've decided to read it again for you all here today. Lo! 'Tis a gala night within the lonesome latter years. An angel throng, bewinged, bedight in veils and drowned in tears, sit in a theatre to see a play of hopes and fears, while the orchestra breathes fitfully the music of the spheres. Mimes in the form of God on high mutter and mumble low, and hither and thither fly, mere puppets they who come and go, at the bidding of vast formless things that shift the scenery to and fro, flapping from out their condor wings, invisible woe. But that motley drama should... Yes, that motley drama, to be sure, it shall not be forgot, for its phantom chased forevermore by a crowd that sees it not, through a circle that's through a circle that ever returneth to that self same spot, and much of madness and more of sin and horror the soul of the plot. But see, amidst the mimic rout, a crawling shape intrude, a blood-red thing that writhes from out the scenic solitude. It rise with mortal pangs, the mimes become its food, and seraphs sob at vermin fangs, in human gore imbued. Out! Out are the lights, out all, and over each quivering form, a curtain, a funeral pall, comes down with the rush of a storm, while the angels, all pallid and wan, upraising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy Man, and its hero, the conqueror worm. And that's how that one works. Okay. Oh, Chicago. Hi, Chicago. Hope you're all shut in and doing what you need to do to combat this thing we're going through. So after that bit, I say, I've been called upon to read something Christmassy for the Christmas fair, and this is the closest thing I've got. Hear the sledges with the bell. Oh wait, I keep forgetting before I start. I have to let you know that there are 4 stanzas to this poem. And I mention that because so that you may more easily note the differences between them. So here we go. First stanza. Hear the sledges with the bells, silver bells. What a world of merriment their melody foretells. How they tinkle, tinkle, tinkle in the icy air of night, while the stars that oversprinkle all the heavens seem to twinkle with a crystalline delight, keeping time, time, time in a sort of runic rhyme to the tintinnabulation that so musically wells with the bells, 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 the jingling and the tinkling of the bells. Second stanza. Hear the mellow wedding bells, golden bells. What a world of happiness their harmony foretells. Through the balmy air of night, how they ring out their delight, from the molten golden notes and all in tune. What a liquid ditty floats to the turtle dove that listens while she gloats upon the moon. And from out the sounding cells, what a gush of euphony voluminously wells, how it swells, how it dwells on the future, how it tells of the rapture that impels to the swinging and the ringing of the bells, 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 of the bells, 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 to the rhyming and the chiming of the bells. At this point, I break and say, American publishers tend to pay by the word, usually. And the clever author can turn this to his advantage. Third stanza. Hear the loud alarum bells, brazen bells. What a tale of terror now their turbulency tells. In the startled ear of night, how they scream out their affright. Much too horrified to speak, they can only shriek, shriek out of tune in a clamorous appealing to the mercy of the fire, and a mad expostulation to the deaf and frantic fire, leaping higher, higher, with a desperate desire, and a resolute endeavor now to sit, or never, by the side of the pale-faced moon. Oh, the bells, 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 what a tale their terror tells of despair, how they clang and crash and roar, what a horror they outpour on the bosom of the palpitating air. Yet the ear it fully knows, yet the ear distinctly tells, in the jangling and the wrangling, how the danger sinks and swells by the sinking and the swelling of the anger of the bells, of the bells, of the bells, 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 in the clamor and the clangor of the bells. Fourth stanza. Hear the tolling of the bells, iron bells. What a world of solemn thought their monotony compels. In the silence of the night, how we shiver with affright at the melancholy menace of their tone. For every sound that floats from the rust within their throats is a groan. And the people, oh, the people, they that dwell up in the steeple all alone, and who tolling, tolling, tolling in that muffled monotone, feel a glory in so rolling on the human heart a stone. They are neither man nor woman, they are neither brute nor human, they are ghouls, and their king it is who tolls, as he rolls, 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 a paean from the bells, and his merry bosom swells with the paean of the bells, and he dances, and he yells, keeping time, 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 in a sort of runic rhyme to the paean of the bells, keeping time, 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 in a sort of runic rhyme to the throbbing of the bells, 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 the sobbing of the bells, keeping time, 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 as he knells, 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 in a happy runic rhyme to the rolling of the bells, 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 the tolling of the bells, 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 the moaning and the groaning of the bells. So there's your Christmas poem. How are we doing on time? Oh, I'm only 10 minutes in. Okay, good. My show at the Dickens Fair is a half an hour show. So I don't know how I can stretch this out for an hour. They give me an hour at Clockwork Alchemy. Whew. Let's relax a little bit. Okay. I've got the wiki page right here, so I can hit you with some cold, hard facts. He was born as Edgar Poe in Boston. And he lived a very happy, carefree life until he was 3, when his mom died of tuberculosis. So that's bad. He was orphaned at 3, and the Allens took him in. And that's where he got his name, Allen. He was never fond of that name. He always called himself Edgar Poe or Edgar A. Poe. The other journalists called him Edgar Allan Poe, but he never said that. He did not get along with his foster father. He went into West Point. He got kicked out of West Point. Lots and lots of arguments between Edgar and John Allen. And finally, he left. But he kept the name. And he joined the army. That's new. I didn't know about that. It doesn't say what rank he met, but he was a sergeant major at West Point before they kicked him out. And he went from Boston down to Virginia, and he sort of wended his way up the East Coast from New York and Philadelphia, and then up to Baltimore, where he spent the rest of his life. And I play him during the final days. Like, he's going to be dead by New Year's. For a couple of years here and there, I did have a Mrs. Poe. And that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed playing a younger, happier Poe. It was very nice. I enjoyed myself quite a bit doing that. However, the audience doesn't come to the Dickens Fair expecting to see a happy Poe. No. They expect to see a drunken, delirious, crazy-ass Poe who does the thing. So that's what I do at Fair. It's a tragic comic performance. I do all my best drunk humor. If anyone has any questions, I don't have to resort to the question and answer period. Just pop them up here. And I will answer any question that you have about him. I'm sure I've got it. Let's read this one. It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that a wind came out of a cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lay down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. So, happy Christmas, Poe! Oh, pardon me just for a moment. Yeah, that poem affects me. I always tear up when reading that. It's not acting. It just happens. What's next? Oh, here's the part. This is great. Here's the part where, at this part, I shake myself out of it. And I say, and now I shall treat you all to a dramatic reading of The Telltale Heart. And I read The Telltale Heart. And the lovely Miss Lady Lovelace and the fabulous Oscar Wilde help me act out The Telltale Heart. And it's always very funny and fun. A word about Mr. Wilde. Nathan Wetzel plays Oscar Wilde at Fair. And we are stretching the timeline a little bit to have Poe and Wilde in the same time frame, because chronologically, that's impossible. They lived at different times. But as we say at Fair, we are a chapter, not a page. We're not doing any specific year. We're covering like a 20, 30-year period. And so Poe is at the beginning of that period and Wilde is at the end. So the point I'm trying to make is we make a fantastic double act. So if you're ever down at the Dickens Christmas Fair, come and check it out. I'm at different times every year, but I'll let you know. Anyway, that was Telltale Heart. I'm not reading it today. I won't be reading it I might, actually. I'm so short on time, I might read it today. Actually, let's do that. I'm going to read that right now. The Telltale Heart. True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I'm mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you this whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object? There was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it, and whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Here's the point where you fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. You should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and I opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. You would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far as I could see him as he lay upon the bed, and would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well within the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye, and this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For you see, it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he'd passed the night. So you see, he would have had to have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at midnight, I looked in on him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, my sagacity. I could barely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. Why, I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. You may think that I drew back, but no. His room was black as pitch with the thick darkness. The shutters were closed for fear of robbers, and so I knew that I could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily, steadily. I had my head in, and was just about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan. I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or grief. Oh, no, it was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from within my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and I pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since that first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had ever since been growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but he could not. He had been saying to himself, "It's just the wind in the chimney. It's just a mouse crossing the floor." Or, "It's just a cricket that's made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with all these suppositions, but he had found all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with its black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was this mournful influence of this unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open! Wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness. It was all a dull blue with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person. I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. Now, have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but an over-acuteness of the senses? I now say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. And even yet, I refrained and I kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye, and meantime the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder with every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, and so I am. And yet, at the dead hour of the night, amidst the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror, and yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder and louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come, and with a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room, and he shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor, and I pulled the heavy bed over him, and then I smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and I examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. The end. No, that's not the end. I'm kidding. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. Then I took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber. I deposited all between the scantlings. And then I replaced the board so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I'd been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. Ha ha! When I had made an end to these labors, it was 4 o'clock. Still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to answer it, with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been dispatched to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was but my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search. Search well. I led them, at length, to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon on the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But before long, I felt myself getting pale, and I wished them gone. My head ached. I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat, and still they chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued, and it became more distinct. So I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued, and it gained definitiveness until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, and yet the sound increased. What could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly and more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and I argued about trifles in a high key with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro, as if excited to fury by the observations of these men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I'd been sitting, and I grated it upon the floorboards, but the noise arose over all and gradually increased. It grew louder and louder and louder, and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible that they heard not? Oh no, they heard, they suspected, they knew that they were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream and die. And now again, hark! Louder, louder, louder! Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more! I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here! It is the beating of his hideous heart. Boom! And the house goes wild. Okay, now let's have a look at all your comments that you made during that last thing. There are lost days before Poe died. Oh, I'll get to that. The days before Poe died, I'll get to that. Favorite stories while you were playing Poe, that's good. I'll get to that. Okay, so what was the first question? Lost days. The last days of Poe. Well, back then, elections weren't as free and above board and carefully planned as they are now. And there was nothing stopping people from voting 2, 3, 4 times. And that was Poe's game. His vote was for sale. And they would feed him full of drugs and booze and dress him up in different clothes and send him to vote. And he would do that because they gave him drugs and booze. So he'd go and vote any way they wanted to, which you should not do. That's a bad thing. So he got all tripped up on goofballs. He disappeared for a couple of days. No one knows where he went. And then they found him at 4 o'clock in the morning on a park bench screaming out Virginia's name. And so they took him to the hospital. And the last thing he said before he died was, "God help my poor soul." So that's the end of that. And then stories as Poe. I'll have to think about that one. And someone suggested that I read Mask of the Red Death. I had considered that. I actually had. But I decided at the last minute to go against that one. Half an hour in. That's good. Lenore says hi. Oh, that's nice. Lenore's brother says hi. Oh, yes, someone from Italy checking in. How you doing? Hope you're okay over there. Oh, boy. All right, I'm going to read this one. I don't do this one at fair. This is a different one. As you can tell, the paper is a different color. I don't do this story at Dickens Fair because someone else does. The two gentlemen who run Alan Jeffries, they have a nice showpiece. They do a nice theater piece of the of this work every year, and it's always a high point. So here it is. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who know so well the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato any cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my way, to smile in his face, although he could not perceive that my smile was now at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although, in other regards, he was a man to be respected and perhaps even feared, he prided himself on his connoisseurship of wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and the opportunity to practice imposture upon the British and Australian millionaires. In a painting, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and I bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk, one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season, that I had encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had a tight-fitting, party-striped dress. His head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him, I thought I would never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! And in the middle of carnival?" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado?" "I have my doubts." "Amontillado?" I must satisfy them." "Amontillado?" "As you are engaged, I'm on my way to Lucrezi. If anyone has a critical turn, it's he. He will tell me." "Lucrezi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry." "And yet some fools will have it that it is a taste for your own, that his taste is a match for your own." "Come, let us go." "Whither?" "To your vaults." "My friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement." "Lucrezi, I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no. It is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre. Or nitre. I don't know. I'm not familiar with this word." "Let us go, nevertheless." "Look, I'll just say mold instead of nitre. I heard that in a book once. "Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you've been imposed upon. And as for Lucrezi, he cannot distinguish Amontillado from sherry." Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm, and putting on a mask of black silt and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning. I'd given them implicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from the sconces 2 torches, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him to several suites of rooms and archways that led to the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together upon the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe," he said. "It's farther on," said I, "but observe the white webwork with which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned towards me, and he looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. "I'll just use the word neater," he said at length. "Neater," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" It says coughing here. My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It's nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said with decision. "We shall go back. Your health is precious. You're rich and respected and admired and beloved. You're happy, as I once was. You're a man to be missed. For me, it's no matter. We'll go back, and you're ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there's always Lucrece." "Enough," he said. "The cough is merely nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." True, I replied. And indeed I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper precaution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps. And here I knocked off a neck of the bottle from which I drew from its fellows that lay upon the mold. I don't read this normally. I must beg your indulgence. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. And he raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused, and he nodded to me familiarly, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried that repose around us." "And I to your long life." Again he took my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Montresors," I replied, "were a great and numerous family." "I forget your arms." "A huge human foot d'or in a field azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant, whose fangs are embedded in the heel." "And the motto?" "Nemo li impune lecicit." "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes, and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. And we had passed through long walls of piled skeletons with casks and puncheons intermingling, into the innermost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by the arm, above the elbow. "The neater," I said. "See, it increases, it hangs like moss in the vaults. We're below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we shall go back before it is too late. Your cough is nothing," he said. "Let us go on. But first, another draught of this Medoc." I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light, and he laughed, and he knocked the microphone away with a gesture I did not understand. Let me fix this here. A gesture I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise, and he repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "Do you not comprehend?" he said. "Not I," I replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood." "How? You are not of the Masons?" "Oh, yes. You? Impossible. A Mason?" "A Mason." "A sign," he said. "It's this," I answered, producing from beneath the folds of my roquelaire a trowel. "You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." Be it so, I said, replacing the tool beneath my cloak and again offering him my arm, and he leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado, and we passed through a range of low arches, descended, pass on, descending again, arriving at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our torches to glow rather than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another, less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th side, the bones had been thrown down. The bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior crypt, or recess, in depth of about 4 feet, in width 3, and height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no special use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of this recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. Proceed, I said. Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucrezi, he's an ignoramus, interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, and I followed immediately at his heels. In niche, and finding an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, his progress was arrested by the rock, and he stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I'd fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron stables, distant from each other about 2 feet, horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain. From the other, a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was much too astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. Pass your hand over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre. Neater? Neater. It is indeed very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Well, then I must positively leave you. But first, I must render to you all the little attentions in my power. The Amontillado? Ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. True, I replied, the Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance to the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of the masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low, moaning cry from the depths of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. And then there was a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with more satisfaction, I ceased my labors, and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel, and finished without interruption the 5th, 6th, and 7th tier. The wall was nearly on a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the torch over the masonwork, I threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. There was a succession of loud and shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of this chained form. It seemed to thrust me violently back, and for a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess. But the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall, and I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. It was now midnight. My task was drawing to a close, and completed the 8th, and the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th, and there remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position, but now there came out from the niche a low laugh, which erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, a very good joke, indeed, and an excellent jest. We shall have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo over our wine. The Amontillado, I said. Yes, the Amontillado, but is it not getting late? They will be waiting for us at the palazzo, Lady Fortunato and the rest. Let us be gone. Yes, I said. Let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor! Yes, I said, for the love of God! But to these words I hearkened in vain. For a reply, I grew impatient. I called aloud, Fortunato! No answer. I called again, Fortunato! No answer still. I thrust my torch through the remaining aperture, and I let it fall within. And there came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick. It was the dampness of the catacombs that made it so. So I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into position, and I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. And for half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat. Boom. Whew, okay. I don't read that one normally, which is why I fumbled a couple of times. What am I seeing? I've never actually watched anyone live stream. What you're seeing is live. You're watching it as I'm doing it right now. Anyone experiences 10th day of staying at home, says my friend in Italy. That's nice. Yeah, that's good. Oh, geez. She's really... Okay, all right. What's next? Poe stories. Playing Poe gives me a chance to be arrogant. And I can't do that in real life. But Poe was a man with an education. And he was not only proud of that, he was smug about it. So, but he's no stranger to the lower half of London. He will happily hang out with the sweeps. One afternoon, I was having a lovely discussion with the sweeps about poetry. And one of them said, "Oh, I've always felt the same way, Eddie. May I call you Eddie?" I said, "You may call me Mr. Poe." And I said that during the first few weeks I was playing him. And something clicked. I really liked the way that worked out. So that's it. I can play snooty. I can correct people's grammar. I often boss children around. Learn your lessons well, children. So with that in mind, this is what he thought of himself. "I have sometimes amused myself by endeavoring to fancy what would be the fate of an individual gifted, or rather cursed, with an intellect very far superior to that of his species. Of course he would be conscious of his superiority, nor could he, if otherwise constituted as man is, help manifesting his consciousness. And thus he would make himself enemies on all points, and since his opinions and speculations would widely differ from those of all mankind, that he would be considered a madman is evident. How horribly painful such a condition! Hell could invent no greater torture than that of being charged with abnormal weakness on account of being abnormally strong. In like manner, nothing could be clearer than that of a very generous spirit, truly feeling what all merely profess, must invariably find itself misconceived in every direction, its motives misinterpreted, such as extremes of intelligence could be thought fatuity. I keep hitting this thing. Such excess of chivalry could not fail of being looked on as meanness in its last degree. And so on with other virtues. The subject is a painful one indeed. And that individuals have so soared above the plane of their species is scarcely to be questioned. But in looking back through history for traces of their existence, we should pass over all the biographies of the good and the great, while we search carefully the slight records of wretches who died in prison, in Bedlam, or on the gallows. He wrote that for a magazine. What have I got left? I've just got the one left. You can guess what it is, but I want to save it. Okay. Oh, good. Yes. 50 minutes. We're good. Right. Let's see where we are. Thank you. Very much enjoyed this. My friend. How delightful, someone says. Okay. Let us continue. I'm wondering if I should stand up for this one. I think I should. Maybe I won't. I'll move it back here. Can I move it back here? Is this good? I'll sit down. Just over my my left shoulder, you can see all the safety equipment that I bought for Clockwork Alchemy. I've got 4 boxes of rubber gloves down there, and 6 packets of handy wipes. Actually, 7, 8. I gave one to the landlady, so I'm set. Okay, was that a short joke, Ben? Are you making short jokes? Let me ask you this: have you ever had your ass kicked by a 10-piece band? Okay. One more. Once, upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. It's some visitor, I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Fain that I'd sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here for evermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, it's just some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. It's some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is. Nothing more. Presently, my soul grew stronger. Hesitating then no longer, sir, said I, or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is, I was napping, and so faintly you came tapping, and so gently you came rapping at my chamber door that I scarce was sure I heard you. So here I opened wide the door. Darkness there. Nothing more. Deep into the darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token. The only word there spoken was the whispered word Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word Lenore. Only this, nothing more. So back into the chamber, turning, all my soul within me burning, and again I heard that chapping somewhat louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. It's the wind and nothing more. Open here, I flung the shutter, when with many a flit and flutter in there stepped a stately raven of the stately days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not with minute stopped or stayed he, but with mind of lord or lady he perched above my chamber door. He perched on a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. He perched and sat. Nothing more. This ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering in from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Well, much I marvelled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore, for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, a bird or beast upon a sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on that placid bust, spoke only that one word, as though his soul in that one word he did outpour, and nothing further than he uttered, and not a feather than he fluttered, until I scarcely more than muttered, well, other friends have flown before. On the morrow he shall leave me as my hopes have flown before. And then the bird said, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, never more. But the raven still beguiling my sad soul into smiling, so straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door, and then upon the velvet sinking I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now seemed to burn into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining, with the lamplight gloating o'er. But whose velvet violet lining, with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by the angels he has sent thee respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempest set, or whether tempest toss thee here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, and by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the destined audience it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the nice Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door, quoth the raven. Nevermore. The raven, never flitting, still is sitting on that pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. His eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming. The lamplight over him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. My soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Yeah. And that is it. I believe that is it for my post-seminar. I've gone for an hour. That was what I was scheduled for. I'll stay on for an extra few minutes to see if any questions have come through. Does anyone have any questions? I can do that. Standing further away, yes. Sitting is good. Hospitals need the gloves. All right. Yes, Lenore. Yes, Lenore. Yes, Lenore. Nevermore, 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 nevermore. Thank you. No questions. I guess I'll sign off. Thank you very much for tuning in. And a special greeting to all the Clockwork Alchemy kids. Oh, it's missing Clockwork Alchemy is it's tough. I don't mind telling you. It's one of our annual shows, and we count on it every year, like Clockwork. It's one of our favorite gigs, and we were really sad to miss it this year. Hopefully, we'll be back next year. And I shall be doing this again next year, if I am so asked. What else should I do? Back to band business. So, I hope you enjoyed the show last night, which I did over there. You can see the mic right there, and there's the fez right there. But www.patreon.com/LeePresson. That is how you can support all this stuff that I've been doing over the weekend. Also, if you want to give me a tip, you can definitely do that. I'm on PayPal at leepresson@gmail.com. Okay. Oh, one other thing. Where are those things? So, I had this made just for Clockwork Alchemy. See? Clockwork Alchemy 2020. Oh boy. Yes. I had high hopes. So what have I got for it? A bunch of stickers I can't use and a mountain of cleaning equipment. However, I'm offering this for sale. If you would like to, if you'd like one to say, yeah, we that was a tough year. If you'd like one, go to leepresson.com, click on Jukebox, and from there you can order our new CD, which I have around here somewhere. Aha! Our new CD, our first CD since 2010, and I'm very happy about it. It's fantastic. So if you haven't bought it, give it a look. I did some songs from it last night. In addition to that, you can get these. These are 4-inch album art stickers, and I'll tell you the story behind that. I've always been a fan of 4-inch album art stickers because way back when, I picked this up. This is a 4-inch sticker of Devo's first album, and I really enjoyed the idea of 4-inch album art stickers. So now I've got some. I've got one. Okay. So go to Jukebox on leepresson.com and there's a bit to order or a CD, and there's a drop-down menu. So you can choose the CD, or one of these stickers, or one of these stickers. That can be done at leepresson.com. Please buy my album. I made CDs just to sell at Clockwork Alchemy. Well, not just, but one of the places I really wanted to sell this CD was at Clockwork Alchemy because I knew you guys were waiting for it. Okay. Clockwork Alchemy, we missed you. We'll be back next year. Everybody, take care of yourselves. Stay inside. Wash a whole lot. And what's your PayPal again? LeePresson, one word, @gmail.com. So yeah, everyone stay safe. And I'll be doing more live videos, I think, because, what else are we going to do? Okay. Bye, everyone.